Hey, Steve Mignani here at Berniston Auto Wrecking doing the junkyard crawl in Berniston, Massachusetts. Does anybody remember the Chrysler LH platform? These were built between 1993 and 2004. And this one here is a 2002 300M Special. Now, before we get to that, you got to remember, if you're a Mopar person in the 80s, you'll remember it was the age of the K car. You know, the front-wheel drive stuff, the Trans 4 engines, and just some boring stuff. It was not a good time to be a car enthusiast, especially if you're a Mopar guy. So when the word came out that Chrysler was tooling a whole new family of vehicles that would debut in the 1993 model year, hopes were high that it would maybe be rear-wheel drive. Now here's the thing, the buzz was so strong that magazines like Mopar Action, this is the December 1992 issue right here, Mopar Action did a preview of the all-new LH cars a year before they came out. And we can see right in here where they're all excited, you know, just say Mo, you know, and here's pictures and the Brunt brothers, which is to say Cliff Gromer and Richard Ehrenberg. But on the left we see the transaxle up front, the 4-speed. These were front-wheel drive cars. But again, there was some hope, you know. And by the way, this is a magazine I used to write for. And this column here, Racing with Big Daddy, I ghost wrote this for Don Garlitz. This is the very first one I ever did. Garlitz wrote a book called Racing with Big Daddy, and this is when he experienced shoot shock, when his retinas were beginning to detach from his eyes, and his optometrist told him stop racing, his ophthalmologist. So he stopped racing, and I wrote this for Big Daddy. And I never got credit for it, but it was 150 bucks a month, so that was cool. But anyway, my first Racing with Big Daddy, now it can be told, 30 years ago. Anyway, in a later part of this book, a continuation of the LH preview story, the circled red part says at the very end, the strong possibilities of a V8 under the hood and all-wheel drive under the floor pan. And that's basically predictions that everybody from Mopar Action to Motor Trend were making about the LH platform. So the hope was that where there's all-wheel drive, there's rear-wheel drive and the V8, well, it never came to pass. But here's the thing, there absolutely were all-wheel drive mule cars built. For whatever reasons, they never did make production. More on that in a second. But this here is the 1993 Eagle Vision dealer brochure. Now we have to remember that the LH platform arrived in 93 as the Eagle Vision, Dodge Intrepid, Chrysler Concorde, and they all had the same 113-inch wheelbase. And in this brochure, here is a shot of the underside of the car, right? Here's the front drive stuff, but look at that very deep tunnel for the exhaust or drive shaft. The rear suspension here in front drive mode, but there's a big void right there. These cars, as they say in engineering, were protected for all-wheel drive. And there were absolutely mules shown and built, but it never happened. So again, we had to wait for the LX platform of 2004 or 5 to finally get a proper rear-wheel drive car, and more on that again in a second. But the thing about the cab-forward LH cars was the fact that they pushed the axles all the way out as much as they could to get the interior volume as large as possible. In fact, these had 122 cubic feet of interior volume, including the trunk, but these things were big cars for their day. Again, 113-inch wheelbase, all 4 doors, no wagons, no convertibles, no 2 doors. They were all this basic platform here, but the whole point was to get the wheels out as far forward and get the cab forward. And again, it's not really conducive to front engine, rear-wheel drive, big Hemi, but more on that again in a second. Now, this one here is a 300M. Now, if you know your Chrysler 300 history, 1965 was the end of the line for the 300L, the letter series. So, in 1999 and a half, the 300M picked up where the 300L left off in 1965, or at least that was the idea. Now the whole thing is, this one is a 300M Special. Now Special is a special version. We look here at the rocker panels, they say 300M Special, and the word special, of course, is these had another 3 horsepower, so 255 horsepower instead of 253, I think it was, 252. Always a 3.5 V6, and the speedometer goes to 150 on the 300M Specials, only 120 on the 300Ms. And of course the waterfall leather seats. I'll come around to the other side. And again, those leather seats, you know, were exclusive to the 300M Special, as was the faux carbon fiber appliques on the dash and doors. Again, this stuff was specific to the 300M Special. But something kind of cool on all 300s, the 300Ms, is the auto stick. Now this, of course, is the automatic, no manual transmissions in the LH family, unfortunately, or at least not for production. But what you do is you put this thing in a drive right there, and it stays in drive, right? Well, no. Here are 2 arrows, minus and plus. You toggle the shift upshift back and forth like that. And this thing actually will upshift at 6,300 RPM. So these would go 0 to 60 in about 6.7 seconds and cover the quarter mile in 15.9. Not too bad, you know, for a full-sized family car. And again, the tachometer reads to 7,000 RPM. There's no red line. So again, we'll get to that in just a second. But again, the 300M Special was an extra special version of the 300M. So let's go to the front of this thing and open the hood and learn a little more. Okay, up at the nose of this thing. All right, well, here it is. This is, again, the 300M Special right there. The special part indicates this thing has a high-flow dual exhaust as opposed to the single outlet seen on the regular 300M. It's good for like another 3 horsepower, kind of silly. But again, that's 253 horsepower, or I think 255 in the Special. But here's the crazy part. This engine, which is an all-aluminum, single overhead cam, Chrysler designed engine, and you gotta love the Ram-tuned intake manifold. The throttle body's back here. But one thing, again, about the cab forward is look how far the cowl comes. It almost covers the engine. And the front drive unit is right here. And unlike most front drive cars, the engine is not transverse. It's north-south. And again, the 4-speed transaxle is located down below, driving the front wheels. But one thing we see right here, it's kind of telling. The 300M was sold for export also. Here is the accessory belt running for the 3.5, like we have here. But what's this? 2.7? What? Yup. There was a 2.7 liter V6, which was installed in 300Ms built for export. And there it is right there. And in between, of course, there was a 3.3 liter pushrod V6 that was used at various years in the LH cars, the Intrepid, etc. So all of this brings me to the point that the 300M was not really a worthy successor to the 300L of 1965. But, and a lot of people complain that these things were shy about 47 horsepower because they never did have 300 horsepower. Now, the thing with the 300 series was that they had 300 horsepower at least, right? Well, Chrysler said, well, in gross ratings, this would have 300 horsepower. In net ratings, 253. Okay, the world kind of fell for it. With all of that said, when I worked for magazines, I went from Mopar Action to Hot Rod Magazine. And when I was there, I used to have a drive that took me down La Brea and Wilshire Boulevards and Fairfax in Los Angeles. And quite often I would see factory engineering mules in plain sight. You see the manufacturer plates, Detroit plates on them, and just weird cars. Well, one time I saw 3 of these things. These were LH cars, but they had extra wheelbase up front right here. They had about another foot of wheelbase. They were primer, and at the back they had 2 big square mufflers with 2 tips coming out on each side. I'm like, what the heck is that thing? And then I looked at the front, and what I saw, instead of the front wheel drive spindle, that's a driven axle, like that, they had dust caps, like that. Now here's the thing, a dust cap means a dead axle. Then I looked at the back of the thing and it had a spindle at the rear. So what I was looking at was pre-production prototypes, engineering mules of the eventual LX, Hemi-powered, rear-wheel drive cars that we now know and love today. So to test the LX Hemi rear-wheel drive cars, Chrysler took a bunch of LH cars, stretched them, put them in primer, and then put Hemis, rear-wheel drive, and all that stuff under the skin and drove them on public roads hiding in plain sight. But they didn't fool me. Again, I saw that extra wheelbase right here. They had longer fenders. It was a weird looking thing. I didn't have a camera. If I did, it would have been so cool to capture some mules riding around in plain sight. But again, you know, Chrysler, of course, has made tremendous amends, not for the crimes of the past, but the front-wheel drive stuff just turned off so many people. The Viper was cool, the Prowler was cool, but there were halo vehicles. The daily stuff, the bread and butter vehicles were just not that compelling compared to, you know, 5-liter Mustangs and Camaros and LS1s and stuff. But Chrysler really banged it out of the park in 2005 with the 300C, or the C300, the Hemi, the 5.7, and the SRT8 with 6.1 liters and 425 horsepower, and then of course the LC, the Challenger growing out of that, the Magnum, the Charger. So the rear-wheel drive cars of today that are still in production really have you know, filled in a hole in my heart that these cars kind of didn't help. But there was rumors that these things were going to be cool, were going to be all-wheel drive, going to be V8. The press was all about it. It never happened. But I saw the future. I saw a mule right there on La Brea Avenue Boulevard in Los Angeles way back in probably 2002, a couple years before the real thing hit dealerships in 2005. But anyway, that's the story of the 300M Special. This was Motor Trend's Car of the Year in 1999 when it came out, as was the 2005 C300 when it came out half a decade later. So it just goes to show that never give up hope when you hear about mules and pre-production prototypes and stuff like that. But as far as this one's concerned, let's look in the back. There's one thing that's kind of neat about this. The wheels on this are specific to the 300M Special. These are just some steelies that are just junkers that somebody put on here. But I noticed in this puppy, the spare tire is still here. This is the unique 18-inch wheel seen on the 300M Special with Michelin Pilot Sport tires. I mean, these are like supercar tires on these things right here. So here's the original spare tire still in place. But these were pretty attractive cars when they were new. And again, it was all about that 300M Special. And the logo even here, right here, the word special above the M. Right there. And so, a pretty cool car in its own way. And another detail on the 300M Specials was the dual exhaust. These guys right here, the standard 300M would just have a single pipe coming out the driver's side. So, and also a 389 axle ratio, by the way, up front. So these were fairly quick, but nothing compared to the LX rear-wheel drive Hemi cars that really brought us right back to the good old days. And I like to say that right now, the good old days are now. All these Hemi cars are being built. It's just a good thing. So these were bricks in the chimney, steps along the way. And so that's the tale of the 2002 300M Special here at Bernstein Auto Wrecking. And if you like this video, be sure to subscribe to the Steve Mag's YouTube channel. There's plenty more to come.